You bought your Japanese car for a reason, right? That legendary reliability. But there's a secret ingredient keeping that engine humming for hundreds of thousands of miles. And honestly, it's something a lot of us get wrong. I'm talking about engine oil. So let's get into it and make sure you're getting it right.
Because here's the thing. A question you have to ask yourself, is using the wrong oil slowly chipping away at that famous reliability? The reality is it's not just some minor slip-up. It can actually undermine the very reason you bought the car in the first place.
So here's what we're going to cover. We'll look at the hidden dangers, we're going to decode those confusing numbers on the bottle, we'll talk about the revolution in oil tech, see what your specific car brand needs, and then wrap it all up with a super simple checklist so you can get it right every single time.
Okay, first up, let's talk about the big picture. Why does this all matter so much? Well, because in a modern Japanese engine, oil isn't just a simple lubricant anymore. It's a critical piece of the engineering puzzle. It's designed to be there.
The best way to think about it is like the engine's lifeblood. It's doing at least 4 massive jobs all at once. It lubricates, obviously, to stop metal from grinding on metal. It cleans, carrying away tiny bits of gunk. It cools parts of the engine that your antifreeze can't even get to. And it neutralizes nasty acids from combustion. If you get the oil wrong, you're weakening all of those jobs.
All right, this is where most people's eyes glaze over. Those numbers on the bottle. But trust me, once you get the logic, it's actually pretty straightforward. Let's finally break down what something like 5W30 really means.
The main concept we're dealing with here is called viscosity. It's just a fancy word for how much a liquid resists flowing. The absolute easiest way to picture it, just think about the difference between pouring water and pouring honey.
Exactly. Water has a low viscosity, it flows super easily. Honey has a high viscosity, it pours really slowly. The magic of engine oil is that it has to be a master of both worlds, and it changes its behavior depending on how hot or cold it is.
So let's look at that code again. That first part, the number before the W, that tells you how the oil flows when it's cold. The W is easy, it just stands for winter. A lower number, like a 0W or a 5W, means the oil is thinner in the cold, and it can zip through the engine to protect critical parts way faster on the cold start. And that's huge, because most engine wear happens in those first few seconds.
Now for the second number. That tells you the oil's thickness when the engine is fully warmed up. We're talking about 100 degrees Celsius. And this is where the engineers have to do this incredible balancing act. The oil has to be thick enough to create a protective film between moving parts, but it has to be thin enough that it doesn't create a bunch of drag, which would just waste gas.
And you know what? That balancing act has led to this absolutely fascinating trend, really pioneered by Japanese automakers. They have been pushing for thinner and thinner and thinner oils, and it's completely changed the game for what goes into a modern engine.
What's really wild is just how fast this has happened. I mean, think about it. Back in the 90s, a thick 10W30 was the go-to. Then you see this progression through the 2000s, and by the 2010s, 0W20 is the new normal. And now, we're even seeing these ultra-thin 0W16 oils. This wasn't a slow crawl, it was a flat-out revolution in engine tech.
So, why? Why the big push? Well, the main driver is fuel economy. It's simple, really. A thinner oil creates less internal friction, less drag, inside the engine. And that seemingly tiny change can give you a 1 to 2% boost in fuel efficiency. Now that might not sound like a lot to you, but for a car company trying to meet really strict global regulations, that is a massive, massive win.
But you couldn't just do this overnight. This whole thing was only possible because of some just incredible engineering. Modern Japanese engines are built with unbelievably tight tolerances. The gaps between moving parts are smaller than ever, so you only need a very thin film of oil. You add that to huge advances in oil chemistry, plus complex systems like variable valve timing that actually use oil as a hydraulic fluid, and you can see why the oil has become so specialized.
Okay, theory is great, but let's get down to brass tacks. What does your car actually need? Let's get practical and look at what the major Japanese brands are demanding these days.
Toyota and Honda, they have been the true pioneers of this thin oil revolution. If you've got a newer Toyota Camry, say 2018 or later, the preferred oil is that incredibly thin 0W16. For most of their other modern cars, you're looking at 0W20. You really have to go back to cars from before the mid-2000s before you start seeing recommendations for the thicker 5W30.
But now, Subaru and Nissan, they're a little different. A Subaru with a turbo, like a WRX, those engines run super hot and absolutely need the extra protection you get from a 5W30 full synthetic. And Nissan, they've been a bit more conservative, sticking with 5W30 for a lot of their famous V6 engines, even though their newer sedans have made the switch to 0W20. It just goes to show you, one size definitely does not fit all.
So how do you take all this and make the right call when you're standing in the aisle at the auto parts store? It's easy. Let's just walk through a simple, repeatable checklist.
First, and I cannot say this enough, your owner's manual is the absolute Bible. Start there. It's the ultimate source of truth. Then, know your engine type. A turbo has different needs than a hybrid. You should always choose a full synthetic with the latest certifications. And finally, think about your climate and how you drive. A lot of short trips or driving in extreme heat, you might need to change your oil a little more often.
And that brings us to the mistakes people make all the time. The biggest one? Just using the wrong viscosity, pouring 5W30 into an engine that was meticulously designed for 0W16. Another huge one is stretching those oil changes way too far. Or, and this is bad, using an old spec oil in a modern turbocharged engine. That can lead to something called LSPI, and it can literally destroy a modern engine. So the takeaway is simple: follow the specs. Period.
You know, when you boil it all down, it really comes back to this one idea. The source material puts it perfectly. Engine oil isn't some minor detail. It is the very foundation that the legendary reliability of these engines is built on.
So, the next time you're due for an oil change, don't just grab whatever's on sale. Take a minute, check the manual, make the right choice, and just ask yourself, is your engine's foundation as strong as the engineers who built it intended it to be?